What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I am your host, Evan Abrams, and today, as always, I'm joined by the one and only Action Network's NFL expert, Chris Raybon. See, I'm on the East Coast. It's like 12:30 p.m. right now. It's a little early because Raybon's West Coast right now, so he's kind of just getting into the rhythm. I'm going to bring him in. Raybon, what's up? Sorry to get you early here.
Oh, no worries. I don't sleep much, so I'm always up.
But yeah, talk to me. What's going on? I mean, listen, I feel like when we get to Masters Week, it's always like a signal that we're, getting close to the draft. It's about 2 weeks out now. Recording this on Wednesday morning, afternoonish. So, at this point, we're just going to go one by one, kind of starting at the top. I think we can, again, forget the number one pick, but there's been a ton of movement. So before we even start at number 2, Raybon, what's your thought process right now? Draft, what you're hearing, just kind of the process.
So I still think that we're going to probably see a blockbuster trade or two that's going to change everything again. But okay. I also think we're starting to see, and if you've listened to this pod, we've kind of talked about just fading that consensus outcome of, at the top of the draft after Cam Ward. And we're already seeing that starting to pay off a little bit where, we talked about, okay, well, what if it's not, that 2, 3, 4 in the order that people think. And already now we're seeing Hunter become a favorite in the number 2 spot. And you could have got him pretty much anywhere but 3 at a great price before. So now we could keep kind of playing this board with these top 5 picks. And but hopefully by the time the draft comes, it's just all gravy no matter what, because I think that this is not going to be the last time that, these odds for the number 2, the number 3, the number 4, the number 5 even kind of get turned on their head a little bit.
Well, I think that is the question, right? Like, it feels like at this point, Travis Hunter was plus 185 last week to go 2. He was even close to 7-1 the week before, and now he's up to minus 280. So I think the question is Hunter 2, and now Abdul Carter sitting at about minus 170 to go 3. Will there be a change again? And I think 2 weeks out, you assume something will happen to kind of shake up the board. Now, I feel like we got it right the first time because we did say, listen, this isn't going to stay the way it is. And we recommended a few prices. Those prices now kind of odds on in a few of these situations. So looking good there. The question is, and you answered it, you think there will be more of a shakeup. So I guess let's just start with number 2. Would you go back to the Shedeur concept there? He's 17-1, 20-1 in some spots. More people have him sliding than kind of doing what we were considering at first because they're talking New Orleans. I even seen some mocks have him in like the 20s, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. But I think New Orleans is feeling like some sort of destination for him right now, just based off who is at the top of the draft. But what are your thoughts there with that concept?
My thoughts are Jackson Dart is up to the 5th most likely player to be taken with that number 2 pick at a bunch of sites. And we talked about that earlier. Okay. So I think that's interesting. I just think, again, Travis Hunter seems to be a guy who, remember, Colorado just had their pro day. So Travis Hunter he's intriguing. Everybody loves Travis Hunter. He's sexy as a prospect. You got that Deion-like offense, defense, ability. So I think Travis Hunter, like regardless of even if the odds settle on the actual pick he goes, they'll probably still be inflated, because I think everyone's just kind of enamored with him. And that's why I think last week when we did the pod, he was a favorite in 2 different picks. I think it was 3 and 4. Yeah. And now look, he's minus 280, minus 300 to go number 2. So yeah, you get what you're going to do if you're listening to this pod and you're trying to follow along and just, place a few bets, take a few positions heading into the draft. You just have to keep kind of playing the odds of not the consensus and take the value that the board gives you. So, Shedeur, there's probably something to the fact that he's sliding. We've heard this a lot. This was kind of a thing that we started to see a few weeks ago, and then you see the pro day, and now he's sliding more. So maybe somebody does know something. I still think he's an okay value there, but it seems like I think really guy like Dart, Abdul Carter now. I mean, he was the consensus number 2 pick for weeks, and he was what, minus 200, minus 300, just the odds that Hunter are now. So maybe you just will sprinkle him as well, because again, you don't want to just be betting on every single person on this list. But Dart is a guy that I want to have exposure to.
Okay.
Sanders, we should have already kind of had exposure there, and then Abdul Carter now at plus 205 is another one I want to get exposure to, because I don't think much changed, in the last couple of days. It's just rumors. So I think Abdul Carter is the play at plus 205. He was in the Hunter spot just last week.
Yeah, I mean, we touched Shador at about 9-1, and that 2 slot at 17 and 18. I'm probably going to put a few dollars on it as well.
Yeah.
Like, nothing has really changed in that time frame, and you probably start to believe some mocks in terms of the slide. But I do think it's still an option there. And you like Carter at 2. I think it's probably worth talking about the Giants at 3 just a little bit. So right now, Carter minus 170, Travis Hunter plus 250, and Shador is 4-1. Now, Carter was plus 340 to go third overall just last week. So, I mean, kind of saying to Raybon's point, these things have been fluctuating at a great amount. I think with 2 weeks left, it's going to kind of just keep going down that path. Hunter was odds on to go 3 last week at minus 160, and now obviously that's completely flipped with him slated to go to Cleveland. So, in terms of just the number 3 pick quickly, because I think 4 and 5, now that we're kind of shuffling, becomes a little bit more interesting. Now that Travis Hunter's not plus 175 to go number 4, like there's a little bit of a different way to look at that pick. But quickly on 3, anything else to recommend there?
This is the pick that, I still have a hard time believing that the Giants don't want to come out of this draft with a quarterback. And you're kind of seeing that reflected a little bit with Shador. He's only 4-1. Even though I think his over-under has plummeted quite a bit. He's 4-1 to go at that number 3 pick. But I think this is the time, and maybe it gets even longer, but I think this is the time where you get some Travis Hunter, right, at plus 250, right? Because we were talking about last week, Abdul Carter could be the number 3. Maybe the Giants trade up, maybe the Giants trade out, but maybe they draft a quarterback later on, and all the quarterbacks are sliding. But now we're looking at a situation where Hunter, either it could be quarterback Hunter, it could be quarterback Carter Hunter, like these scenarios that we just talked about last week, and he was the favorite for. Now he's plus 250. So that's the way I'm approaching it. This is not the last time this is going to change. I'm going to buy low on Hunter now, but I think realistically, I still expect the Giants to want to come out of this draft with a quarterback. Now, maybe they trade the pick, but Jackson Dart, 75-1. I'm going to sprinkle something on that too. So that Dart and then the last week's favorite Hunter, those would be my 2 targets.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the Giants draft, they've got 3, 34, 65, and 99. So, I mean, I would say they probably have an opportunity to potentially grab another one if they like them in terms of their draft board, if Shador is not the pick. Just shopping at a few books right now, I do see the Giants to take Shador at like the highest price I see is about 420, 430 in some places. And I even see as low as 250. So obviously shop around, but at that price, it trumps the taking him at that 3rd slot. So as we've said like a million times in these pods, definitely come up with a concept in terms of what you want to do in terms of the draft. Like if you like Shador to go to the Giants, well, that's him going 3, or that's his specific market, or there's a lot of different ways to play this. So make sure you take a look at that. But that's just go.
Oh, sorry, I just wanted to go back really quick where you were talking about Shador to the Giants. It just hit me that we did kind of gloss over the number 1 pick, and we did hear a rumor last week that the Giants are trying to trade up with the Titans for the number 1 pick. So I don't see as the markets for, who Cam Ward, the team he's going to be drafted by, up right now. So that's kind of interesting and something to watch out for too, because remember, it might not be the Giants in that number 3 pick, not only because they've traded back, maybe they trade up. So that could have an effect on a lot of these bets as well. And there's probably some value to be had there in Cam Ward to be drafted by that we're not seeing yet. But if we do see that, that's something I'd be looking to see maybe potentially fade the Titans a little bit or take a flyer on the Giants somehow.
Yeah, I was looking around. I can't find anything specific there, and I think it's probably on purpose at the moment because everyone is just making the assumption. But maybe something that'll pop up closer. But let's move to the fourth pick here. So here are the updated odds at the moment. You've got Will Campbell plus 150-ish, Mambu, the tackle, at 3-1. Then you've got Abdul Carter plus 350, and then Travis Hunter 650, and then you get to Mason Graham at 10-1. Now, if you're making the assumption that Carter and Hunter aren't the options here because they're already gone, which I feel like in some order they probably will be entering the fourth pick, it's interesting that Campbell has become the favorite. And Membu kind of moving down a little bit. I mean, many people didn't think that 4 was even an option for him. So interesting that he's slated in that position. But what are your thoughts in terms of the Patriots?
They're a team that I think could trade down. I've kind of thought that for a while, and that kind of complicates this pick from a betting perspective because even though you're seeing both of the tackles as favorites, as the top 2 in terms of odds, and they're both at plus money, I think that's just reflective of how uncertain this is. It's probably still a little inflated because if you got those 3 guys going off the board, Ward, Hunter, Carter, at some point, some team might trade up for a quarterback here. They might, and the Patriots might be the team that trades with them. And so, Shador and Dart are 33-1 and 75-1. That's probably too long there, but it starts to get really dependent on quarterback now, because if the Patriots stay put, it's probably going to be one of those 2 guys, but there was also other markets where you could kind of bet which one. And I think wasn't Campbell behind Membo momentarily for a couple of days? Yeah. So we can't pretend that we know more than we know. Like, you got to know what you don't know. And ironically, that's actually how you bet these kind of futures and the draft in general at this point, especially this far out, is know what you don't know and profit, and know what we all don't know and profit off that. And so I think that I would still kind of go with the, just kind of betting the, which one of those guys will go first based on who's the underdog. Like last week, we got Campbell at plus money. Now you'll probably get the other side of that. So
sure,
that's what I would do. As far as the pick itself, I really think the only 2 guys worth sprinkling are the quarterbacks, just because that's the kind of, that's what could come out of left field. It's just some team that we don't foresee now trading with the Patriots. So that's how I would kind of approach that number 4 pick.
Yeah, Shador 33-1 to go in that 4 slot to whoever would be in that 4 slot, because it wouldn't be New England in that position. I think the Patriots, and many people have said this, just praying that a quarterback goes top 3 so that they can at least get probably one of the top 4 players and not have to kind of make this decision. But they're not really in control of that, so they will see how that goes. The other thing I think that's interesting is you look at some EDP consensus, the 2 players who are really shooting up the board when you just talk about average position, Will Campbell, who was at around 10, now down to about 4.95, really in that top 5 range based off of the conversation we just had, and Kelvin Banks Jr., about 20, now down to about the 15, 16 range, both offensive linemen. So interesting enough. I mean, those are the positions that we've talked about numerous times being crucial to any team, but moving up the board as well. In terms of the 5th pick, right now, Graham was the favorite last week, and he's still the favorite, but he's moved from even to minus 150. I just feel like he's been pegged to Jacksonville. Literally, that was like the first bet we saw on the board, and it really hasn't moved since, because I'm not really sure there's a reason for it to move. Is there any other thought here on Jacksonville other than Graham?
Well, yeah, and so I do want to point out, just because we're looking at these boards for, who is going to be the number 5 pick. And we always talk about there's so many different markets when you're betting the draft. So just be aware, like when you say Jacksonville, we're talking about the number 5 pick. That might not be Jacksonville, because Jacksonville may trade up, they may trade back. Like they're kind of an unknown. I've been saying that too. We don't know with this new regime exactly how they're going to approach things. So Jacksonville is another one of those teams that could kind of throw a wrench in the situation. But I think when I look at the board, the two guys that stand out to me are, and again, aside from the quarterbacks, but because that some team could trade with Jacksonville and if they want a quarterback at that point. But the two offensive linemen. Membo is plus 550 and Campbell is 10-1. Now, at the number 4 pick, they're the two favorites, plus 150, plus 300. So again, there's a chance that teams just like somebody wants a quarterback or Jacksonville just wants a certain player. Maybe a quarterback goes in the top 3. Like there's a lot of different outs for where, there's like a little bit of a shuffle between, these really any pick after, 1, but even 1 is now kind of in question because we know the Giants are trying to move up. So just remember that, like a team that we think could be making the number 4 pick, maybe they're making the number 5 pick. Maybe the Patriots trade down 1 spot or the Jags trade up 1 spot. We don't like things like that could happen. There could be surprise teams that make a blockbuster deal. So I would just kind of look at the guys who we expect to kind of go in this range anyway that are all of a sudden super undervalued because everyone's kind of basing these odds on the teams currently in these slots. Because clearly, if you got 2 guys, the 2 favorites in the pick before, and then all of a sudden it's plus 550 and 10-1, that kind of tells me that it's very team based right now, and that's going to be so easy to move in just one swift. Any one deal could turn everything on its head. So that's how I would look at that. I would go with the 2 linemen at this spot because you can't bet everybody, right? So the 2 linemen and then maybe even the quarterbacks, like at this point, I think 5 maybe you sprinkle, but after that, then you kind of got to there's other ways you can attack the market, but that's probably the way I would do it. I would look at the linemen and maybe a sprinkle on the quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think 4 and 5 you sprinkle the quarterbacks, and at 5 I do agree with the linemen, and I only say this in terms of just odds. So Membu at plus 550 to go 5, Campbell at about 10-1. But if you look at their odds to be a top 5 pick, Graham minus 140, Campbell minus 135, Membu plus 130. I would just prefer them to be one of them to go into that 5th slot, I think, in terms of the odds. Now, I know there's other positions and other ways to lose those bets, but just looking at how the market is looking at the player, which is, based off of people listed, and they're obviously ignoring Carter and Hunter and, the people who are obvious top 5 picks, but it is interesting based off of that. So
one other guy I'll mention is Genty. Now he's 8-1, so those probably want a little bit longer. But my thought process with he probably is another guy that I now that I look at this board, I do want exposure to because he's been I don't want to say widely, but he's been mocked in quite a bit to the Raiders at 6.
Yep.
Now that's Bears at 10 are another possibility, but if teams think the Raiders are going to take him at 6, and all it takes is one team that maybe is like, hey, running backs are valuable in our book or something, like who knows? They might think they have to trade up to 5, and the Jags at 5, we don't really, like you said, they're like locked into this one pick where if it's not that guy, then who knows? Maybe they don't feel strong, or maybe they are looking to shop that pick. So maybe a team kind of slides in there, and even I don't maybe even 4. But now that if you look at he's 20-1, if you're gonna do it at 5 at 8-1, you probably want to do a little sprinkle at 21. I don't think teams are gonna value, even though he's a special player. I don't think teams are gonna value the running back position that high. But I just thought I'd point that out with the number 5 is that the Raiders have been kind of expected to take him at 6 if he's there. So if you wanted to get him, you'd have to be at 5 or higher. And I think the Jags, because they don't need a quarterback, and there's really, there's not like a ton of different guys. There's a little bit of a drop off after those top 3 guys. I think the Patriots, but the Jags too are in a position where they might end up not making that 5th selection, the 4th and the 5th selections respectively.
A long shot to think about with Genti going on basically exactly what you just said is I see exact team to take him, and I've got Dallas at 15-1 and Jacksonville at 15-1. Now Dallas would take a trade up or him sliding to 12, and Jacksonville would just, taking him in that slot and trading him or using him. I mean, there's a few avenues for that to happen, but I do see those 15-1s, at least from what I'm seeing, is the best odds in the market. So obviously shop around, but that seems like a decent other than Raiders situation. I mean, the Bears are plus 260, the Saints are 9-1. I think the Saints are mildly intriguing. I think the Bears it's a little too short for me, considering maybe Chicago goes running back. I mean, they've been rumored with maybe trading Swift for Breece Hall or all sorts of different things, but to me, that's probably the way I would play Genti.
Yeah, and the Raiders, I think, have, just based on their roster, quite a few ways they could go. But then the Bears have kind of the luxury of, if there was a team that was going to overspend on a running back, not that I'm saying the Bears should, but because of the way they attack the O-line, because of the fact that they got their quarterback situation under control, and now you got the offensive, you got the coaching staff that you want in place, they have the luxury probably of being a bit aggressive there, and that could look really good if they kind of trade up and take him and everything kind of comes together more quickly than maybe we thought, or, kind of the way we thought it was going to happen last year. So they definitely are a team to watch out for, but I agree. I think you probably want to bet on him dropping to them rather than, just because of the odds, just rather than them trading up. And still, I mean, there's 30 other teams that could, trade too. So it's like, I think those odds are a little short, but it's definitely a possibility. And I do think they have the luxury of doing it.
The Bears are just confusing to me. We're going to talk about draft position for teams later, and there's nobody, I think, or no position in most books below like 2-1 on Chicago, because I think it's just they can go in a lot of different places. All right, so let's move on to the next topic here, and we kind of touched on this already, but I feel like it's worth talking more about Shedeur in just a few different ways, because at the moment I think it's the biggest storyline, because have him slated 2, have him slated 3. Now we're talking 9 and a few other slots. And if it's not 9, I mean, the guy's just probably going to fall unless someone trades up for him. So his position over under was 3.5 last week, and it was minus 170 to the over, plus 140 to the under. Now it is 8.5, and it's minus 200 to the over, plus 160 to the under. Now the team to take him has adjusted as well, as you would assume, because he's sliding a little bit. But let's just talk about the position for a second, and then we can get into some teams. There's just any other thoughts on what you would do with just the rumors around Shedeur 2 weeks out, right? Because, I mean, everything is going to change at any moment given news. But right now, given what you're seeing.
I don't know. Just let me tweet Mel Kiper and see if he's coming out with his next mock and where he had Shedeur. And then
I mean, that's what it is, right? I mean, the odds are moving. The odds are moving because of, influencer mocks, and, good or bad or accurate. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing, and other people might be following. But I mean, to move 5.5 slots and really, again, seeing him go in the teens, 20s, and people being like, it's got to be New Orleans, because if it's not New Orleans, then where? It feels like there is an opportunity at some point, right, Raybon?
Absolutely, because listen, Mel Kiper, and he's great at what he does, but I think he had him at 9, and his slot has been 8.5 now, and I think this is the kind of downside of what we discussed a few weeks ago when we started talking about the draft, which is kind of locking into the most popular mock drafters, the most popular mocks, the consensus, because when we're mocking, no matter who it is, how good they are, we're all constrained by the current draft order. And so we are essentially trying to assign guys to teams. And when those assignments don't work, we just don't know where to put them. And so I think a lot of people kind of question whether, the Browns would take quarterback here if they had a high enough grade and really pass on, a guy like Hunter or Carter. And I think a lot of people are questioning whether the Giants would do the same if they're not able to get up to 1 and get Cam Ward. So now you're just looking like, all right, well, if I'm Mel Kiper and I don't have, if I have, Ward, Hunter, Carter to the top 3, now where do I put Sanders? Because now I can either make a bunch of trades, early in the draft. So I think it just comes from mocks more than anything. Now it's very possible he could have heard something, or there could be something to it, but we just don't know. And the fact that we don't know, I would kind of be skeptical at this point that there's more substance or that anything really changed. I think we always kind of thought that, like I said, I think Dart might be better, but Sanders he's just not he might not be as sexy to mock drafters even. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think a lot of NFL teams might actually have a higher grade on him, but he's just not that fun for, maybe some of us watching as some of these other guys. So I think it's a lot of noise. I think this is just a situation where I would still kind of be looking at to kind of fade that, but we've already kind of done that. We've talked about that, so we'll see where it goes, but I wouldn't be surprised to see his over under back in the top 5. I also wouldn't be surprised to see it fall out of the top 20. I think you just kind of play off the uncertainty right now. And for me, the only certain thing I'm seeing is that a very, very influential mock drafter mocked him to a spot, and now that's his over under.
I mean, the only other thing I would say is in terms of the odds, right now he is plus 450 to go to the Steelers. That is a one book. The highest I see is about 650, and he was in that 450 range. So I think Pittsburgh is intriguing. I kind of wish it was a little bit longer, but the slide to me leads to Pittsburgh. I mean, if they're talking Jackson Dart and somehow both quarterbacks don't get picked, which I don't know if that's realistic in this situation, but Pittsburgh needs a quarterback. And for them to be third on this list when we feel like the Giants might do something different, and right now the whole world thinks he's going to New Orleans, and sometimes that happens, but in the draft there's smoke screens. A lot of times that doesn't happen, especially 2 weeks out. I still feel like Pittsburgh's intriguing. And the other one out of left field would be the Rams, just because it just makes sense for them at some point to get some other quarterback into that room. But again, at 11-1, I wanted a little bit longer, so I don't know what else to do there.
And it's tough because I think Shedeur is kind of set up to slide in this in this time leading up to the draft, just because you got a bunch of teams at the top who could use a quarterback, and there's one quarterback that is kind of expected to go number 1, but then there's also like pretty much every team, I think, even the Titans, one on down at the top of the draft, wants those options, right? I think teams lower down, there's like if people are talking to teams, let's say in those spots after the Giants and Browns, they're probably, we don't want Shedeur because they don't want to drive up his price. So you probably have like every quarterback needy team besides the 2 or 3 at the top that are saying like, we don't want this guy, because if they jack his value up, then the trade value for that, they have to pay more. So I think he's kind of built to have this like artificial slide. But again, I also maybe it's a Jackson Dart thing, but either way, there's long odds on both of those kind of outcomes. So that's the way I would look at it. I just think that there's no real incentive for anybody but maybe the Cleveland Browns to say we're really high on Shedeur Sanders right now.
Yeah, and just giving out the odds before we kind of move on here. So Bet365 had the Giants as a favorite at plus 275, followed by the Saints at plus 350, and the Browns at 5-1. But you just look at FanDuel, and the Saints are favored, plus 270, with the Giants at plus 420 and the Steelers at plus 450. So to me, shopping around here, you're going to find a lot of different prices. You just kind of try to find the destination. All right, that is Shedeur. Why don't you take it off here, Raybon?
All right, so Do you guys ever watch sports and find yourself wishing there was a way to get into the game? With Underdog, there's finally a way to make picks on sports without leaving the crib. The game is in your hands. To play, you just choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats: touchdowns, strikeouts, points scored. You know the deal. And they've got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. Create entries with all football picks or mix and match across other sports. You can play with as little as $1. And if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your shmoney. So turn $1 into 1,000 just with your sports knowledge. And I love playing best ball NFL on Underdog. It's one of those things that, you know, I've already started playing, and it's just April just started. So really love the Underdog app. You can do so much, so many different things anytime of the day, any slate, any year, any time of the year. So really love Underdog. And you could download the Underdog app and sign up now using the promo code Action Network to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code Action Network. Claim your special offer today, and you could get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon your first deposit. It must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY.
Raybon, when you say shmoney, it just makes me miss football season. So makes me a little sad we're in April. But let's go. I know, right? Let's go through.
About to start. That should be fun.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Wonder who will fire their coach.
Yeah, that is accurate. Wrong podcast, but we'll get there soon. We're going to go through these kind of quickly now because we're just, looking at the props on the board. And I want to start with position favorite. We've done this a few times, and we've gotten a few of these right. So let's start with wide receiver. So McMillan is down to minus 250, Golden's plus 170. I guess the most interesting thing is 2 weeks ago, it was minus 300, plus 200. So it's going into Golden's direction at the moment. I mean, we've talked about this numerous times. I still feel like at plus 170, I would touch Golden because I still see McMillan sliding. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I mean, in the 20s, in the 30s, Buffalo, Baltimore, I feel like there's options for McMillan later in the draft, and I just see Golden, his EDP getting shorter.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the way to go. Now, ideally, you would have already invested because this was something we kind of had the pulse of. Now the odds are getting to a point where it's probably you probably wanted at least 2-1. I think that's kind of 3-1 with McMillan. It still is a favorite. So now it's getting to the point where I don't think there's as much value. But if you've already got some Golden futures and you really want to fade McMillan, I mean, hey, maybe we even sprinkle something on Ibuka or Luther Burden's 50 to 1. I feel like he's an intriguing prospect. I don't think it happens, but it's probably more likely than 50 to 1. So if you're already in that market with Golden, I think you got a good thing going. But we'll see how low these McMillan odds get, because there could be a point where if McMillan, if Golden overtakes McMillan, which very well could happen if enough mocks kind of go that way, it would probably be time to invest in McMillan because he's still kind of been the consensus favorite for most of the offseason. And again, I don't think nothing's changing except more people might be paying attention or, kind of changing their minds. But I don't think much has changed with the two players. So even this movement it's sharp right now, but it's still a little bit artificial because nothing's really changed.
Yeah, I just feel like it's preference at this point. All right, let's go tight end. I liked Loveland a few weeks ago. He's still 450. Warren's minus 750. I think that bet's dead. I just don't see. I really thought there would be some momentum there, but it seems like Warren, if anything, is kind of staying pretty steady. I see him New Orleans. I see him Chicago. I see a few Indianapolis as we talked about, and it feels like Indianapolis has him as their preference. But I still have a little bit of Loveland position, so I will be staying tight. But there's nothing to do there, right?
I mean, yeah, and the one thing I'll say is it kind of relates more to just other markets surrounding in the teens and surrounding the Colts in terms of draft position. But when we say like the Colts are, it's like their preference to draft him. It's really more mock drafters' preference to mock him to the Colts, because the Colts and tight end is, everybody just kind of connecting those two because of the, black hole that was the four-way committee of, what was it, Granson, Cox, Will Mallory sometimes, and who am I forgetting? Ogletree last year. So
yeah,
they could use a tight end, absolutely, but it's also one of those things where as mock drafters, we're just kind of assigning him to the most likely team. Maybe that things change. Maybe they move. Maybe there's other movement that could change everything around. So, the market's pretty dead. I think it's, if you're gonna bet on this tight end market, I think you look at you try to find a way to bet on where Warren's gonna go, when he's gonna go, or Loveland, but not Loveland overtaking him, because I just think Warren's a complete tight end, and there's just not this massive appetite for pass catchers. There's, like we said, offensive linemen are getting shorter odds. We know the quarterbacks might even be able to undervalued at this point, and there's some great defensive players at the top. So, I think if anything, it's you got to look at their individual markets. But Loveland is more of like a pass catching guy, whereas Warren, I think, is a little bit more of a complete player. So. That's why I think he's pretty locked in to go first.
The one thing I would consider is if you see Loveland markets to the Colts, like if Warren's gone, I think that becomes more likely than his odds would take into consideration. But I don't see those markets yet. Offensive line, Campbell's the favorite now. Now minus 155, Membu plus 120. Membu was minus 270 2 weeks ago when we had that flip. To me, I would actually nibble back and try to get the plus at plus 120, because I do feel like tons of mocks have Campbell at the 4 slot. I think that could change. So I would probably nibble back.
Do you nibble at Banks? Around 10 to 1. I know you talked about him flying up some boards. You think this is too much, or?
I think it's a little much. I think, and again, I see some information from reporters who have like what you call good information on certain teams, but you're right. It's mock central. It's mock heaven. It's pretty much how we're analyzing most of this. I feel like Banks is the third guy. I'm not necessarily seeing him get into that slot to beat both of them, maybe one of them. 10 to 1's intriguing, but I would probably just take Membu at this point.
Yeah. And, hopefully we see his odds get a little longer, even to kind of the spot where Campbell's were, where they were at flip-flop, because again, this is what we're trying to do. We're just trying to essentially get both sides of these markets when there's so much uncertainty, and we just win either way. If we can kind of narrow it down to like the most likely outcome and the second most likely. And I think you're almost certainly right. I just bring up Banks because we've seen crazier things happen. Sometimes we think, especially with positions that aren't like skill, sometimes there's just, less information, and a team might consider a guy that, the media didn't. But if it's Campbell and Membu, and we think it is going to be that in terms of, that top 8, then it's probably going to be one of those two. And we got the flip-flop odds. So I would take Membu at, plus money, but I'm hoping he gets to, plus 250, plus 300, like Campbell was a couple weeks ago.
All right, DL Edge is pretty simple. It doesn't take into consideration Carter, so Abdul Carter out of the conversation. Graham's minus 700. He was 600. Stewart's 11 to 1. I don't think you touch it. I think Graham's pretty likely to be that first one off the board. In terms of the DB, Will Johnson minus 140, Barron plus 110. Obviously, that market does not take into Travis Hunter. I don't really have an opinion. I think Will Johnson more likely, and I think it probably just breathes into the odds a little bit. Any thought there before we move on?
Yeah, it's interesting that Barron is moving up. I mean, it seems like noise,
it is shorter.
But I think the ideal would be, because they're both or Barron's already at such short odds, is that this is one of those situations where you're probably looking to back the favorite as his odds get deflated.
I agree.
If we're starting to hear more Barron hype, and what usually could happen in these situations is that he might not necessarily overtake him. It just might be just like teams maybe aren't as big into the wide receiver market early. They might be bigger into the cornerback market, than we thought. And both of those guys go earlier than expected, but it doesn't necessarily mean like one guy will get jumped over. And so I'd be looking to get Johnson if he somehow got to even money or better. That would be ideal. But even at minus 120 or something like that, for a guy that's pretty much been the favorite outside of this, again, just a lot of, I feel like it's artificial hype at this point. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, and Johnson's third on that list in terms of stock up average EDPs, right behind the offensive lineman. So yes, at the moment, he is hot.
And I think going back to what we kind of a few other spots we touched on where it was like at the end of the pick, you said people have the Saints to do it. I feel like the Saints are kind of the chameleon here, where no one really knows what they're going to do, and now a lot of people have decided that hey, maybe they're going to end up taking a quarterback, and because quarterback is such a popular and the most hyper visible position. Now I think that's kind of also deflating to Johnson out because a lot of people thought the Saints would take him. So it's kind of interesting in that sense that I think New Orleans is causing a lot of us a lot of trouble in terms of we just don't really know what they're going to do, and that's kind of it's having an effect on some other markets that we can probably just kind of benefit by fading the hype.
Yeah, they're a mess. Yeah. I mean, they are all over the place, especially if you don't think Shador is the answer at 9. There is a lot to consider.
Well, don't they still have Derek Carr? I mean,
obviously, yeah.
So, I mean, I think they think he's the answer. They wouldn't have brought him back, right? So, who knows?
All right, let's go through some props right now. I have just 5 of these listed. I just want your quick thoughts as I thought they were intriguing. And then we are going to finish on position to team markets, little updates there, hit on a few of them. So to me, 2.5 quarterbacks is just in the first round is an intriguing prop. Minus 175, over plus 200, under is the odds right now. Any quick thoughts on 2.5? I mean, obviously you've been talking about Dart moving up, but are you willing to pay the price that he stays in the first round?
At those odds, probably not. Because I think we have to kind of. I think it's been all artificial hype or the opposite of with Sanders, but
sure.
That's really been kind of the bigger unknown is how do teams actually feel about Dart. We've been hearing some whispers, so probably to the positive, but the odds are priced that way. So it'd be a situation where I'd be looking to fade it, but at 2-1 is not, those aren't good enough odds. And there's much better ways to kind of play a Shador slide or a Dart slide or something like that. So nothing for me on this one. If forced though, I would take the over. I do think there are enough quarterback needy teams and enough teams at the top that would be willing to kind of move around that would push me to that to 3 being the number.
And speaking of Dart, his draft position is a little different depending on the book, which is intriguing. I see 21.5s, 23.5s, and 24.5s. Now, obviously, juice different at all the books and, probably comes out to a little bit even, but every half position and full position on those over-unders is like really, really valuable, especially because if you notice, I mean, everyone is all the books are setting those over-unders right over or under their like projected team. The other ones would be like Golden and McMillan are 17.5, while Seattle's at 18, Hampton's at 19.5 with Denver at 20. Like they know what they're doing. But I think with Dart, it's really intriguing because you really have like a 2 or 3 pick middle. Any quick thoughts there before we move on?
Yeah, but you sounded like our guy Sean Kerner, real quick with the every yard in this market is so valuable. Every half a draft slot. But no, so I think the way to play dart is you got to go with the longer odds, because looking at his median, which is in the 20s,
Mm-hmm.
I think that obviously means the books are saying it's somewhere around 50-50 that it goes higher or lower. But if you're looking at picks like number 2, number 3, number 4, like those 4 or 5 top picks, where I think there's some real potential there, because especially with the Shador slide, I think that's how you want to bet those. And those were going like 50-1, 75-1.
Yeah,
You can't bet every pick, and you're not really getting much incentive to bet the under. That's the way I would go. I would bet he goes sooner than 20. I bet he goes in the top 20 essentially. So
sure.
I would go under, but I just don't think I'm getting enough value. Like that's not like a median type bet that I want to make given the other markets out there, because I think there's a lot more of a chance for him. It's like a wide range outcomes where he could, if he does go higher than that, or lower, I should say, than that 21, 23,
So
24
confusing.
and a half, he's probably going very early. So I would just kind of bet on that. And I mean, if he goes like 18th and I miss out, I'm okay with that.
And just to be clear, so draft order here: Denver 20, Pittsburgh 21, LA Chargers 22, Green Bay 23, Minnesota 24. So that is basically, you're trying to pinpoint and pluck out which teams you feel like, wouldn't look that direction. Obviously, Minnesota is interesting. Green Bay probably wouldn't. So the 23.5, 24.5 feels intriguing to me, because you might as well go under 22.5, because you're not going to think those two teams are under 21.5, if you understand what I'm saying. All right. Let's do 2 more here, and then we can do positions. I feel like Emeka, I'm not going to say his name right. Emeka Ibuka,
Yeah,
that's the way I'm going to say it. To go in the first round is an interesting prop bet at the moment, just considering that wide receiver is 2.5 with the over -170, the under +210. But at Caesars, they actually have Emeka's draft position over under 28.5. And it's pretty much even either way. So you kind of have the choice of, I think he's probably the 3rd wide receiver. So the first bet of over or under is probably him as well. And then you can kind of mess around with a few picks there at the end, because you still have Buffalo. You still have Baltimore. Like, there's a lot of people still sitting there over that 28.5 range, where, he might fall in the first round as well. So I feel like there's a few options with him.
Yeah, Baltimore is interesting. I think Baltimore may end up being more in the market for a wide receiver than we think. So, depending what they do in the next couple of weeks or in the draft, they could be a team that is a potential landing spot. Now, the question is, how do you want to attack this market? Because, like we said, we don't really know the appetite now for wide receivers in the first round. It just seems like, reading the tea leaves, there's just a lot of teams that have needs that would kind of usurp the need for a wide receiver. And these wide receivers, they're kind of sexy picks. So I feel like they're a little bit inflated right now. So like I said, I think even a sprinkle on Ibuka to be the number 1 receiver taken is not the craziest thing. And I think he was 13-1. So, because I just, I don't think you want to go with the over at those juiced up odds. And then, the 28.5 is more interesting, but there could be a situation where wide receivers market is depressed and he does go lower, but he's the number 1 guy taken, your number 2 guy taken. So I think I would just try to find markets with him to be at longer odds. So right now you can get him to be the first taken, and I'm sure that leading up to the draft there'll be markets on the 2nd receiver taken as well, and I think you want to sprinkle some there as well. And that's how I'd play that more so than the media in general, just because of the amount of markets, the sheer amount of markets available at the draft. I think this is a time where I'm playing less of those kind of like over under median type of plays
Okay.
than I would in like just like a random prop slate or something like that, just because there's no real way to, find those true odds projection wise the way there is if, let's say, we're trying to, we're projecting yardage for Brian Thomas Jr. or something, and we can kind of have an idea of like, okay, based on matchup and the quarterback and this and that, you kind of have a number. Where it's here, it's so like it's just so uncertain, and one or two moves or just kind of things that don't go your way, and there's 32 teams competing and their thought process is all interweaving versus a game where it's like two, that it makes it tough to really nail some of these, or the incentive, I should say, is not as great here to nail some of these medians. So I'd be looking. I am intrigued by Ibuka, but I would be looking at longer odds for markets for him.
And the longest price I see him to be the first wide receiver taken, which again I think you're going to find markets for second, which might be more intriguing closer to the draft. But he's 14-1, and Burden's 66-1. MGM both those prices. Those are just fun.
I doubt he makes noise, but he is intriguing. I mean,
but him to go second wide receiver, I guess would be something I would potentially look at, but I'd have to see the odds. All right, let's do position to team before we get out of here. I'm going to open it up. I've taken a bunch of notes here on just some interesting changes in teams and stuff like that. But is there anything off the top that you just find you have to talk about right now?
I mean, I think there's always going to be teams that kind of fly under the radar because, they were good last year, and teams kind of in that bottom of the draft. I think we spent so much time talking about the first few picks and then get into those middle guys. But I wonder what a team like Baltimore is going to do, because they made a surprise move last year, and they go out and get Derrick Henry, and they made waves. Might they do something with a veteran this year, and that could change their draft priority, or might they be looking? Because I think they might be looking for more weapons for Lamar. And right now, like all the offense, because their lineup is they've had their core guys and they're kind of set. Taking a receiver first is 12-1. Talked about maybe that's a potential landing spot for Ibuka, or even Golden Tet, one of those guys could fall. I think they're looking for some speed, so I actually think Ibuka or Golden probably be the bets. But taking a receiver, they're like 12-1, and even a tight end, they're 50-1 or greater at pretty much every book. Might they be a dark horse for a guy like Loveland if Warren's, or even Warren? Maybe who knows, because they're a team that they do play bigs, right? They play Andrews, likely Kohler, Ricard, so they play enough bigs to where I think a tight end may be valuable to them as well. So I know defense and the defensive line is kind of that position everybody's looking at, but I think there's a chance that they're still looking offense, because they got to maximize. I mean, how good has Lamar been? And for him to still kind of be trying to sniff that first championship, they might feel the pressure and really feel like they want to make a splash with a skill player. So this is a team where I'd actually be looking for an offensive skill player. Usually you want to fade that because it's just it's kind of the people because of the fantasy and stuff, you just know more of those guys. But in this case, I think Baltimore's really interesting for a pass catcher, especially a wide receiver.
Yeah, I think specific markets like McMillan to Baltimore, I think, is intriguing. The one market in terms of specific position with Baltimore, I kind of like safety. Now, Starks has to kind of fall there to get there, and Amanawari could make his way to Baltimore as well. But I feel like I see 7-1, I see 750. I think those odds are intriguing. Now, a lot of people believe defensive line. I think wide receiver is cool too. I think safety and wide receiver at like 12-1 and 7 plus 750 are good ways to attack Baltimore at the moment. D line plus 150, it is the favorite, but that is, I think, safety for me, and seeing a few of those guys mocked there, and it also kind of makes sense based off of how their team, their scheme, etc. So that would be the way I would take Baltimore. Any other teams here intrigue you?
Well, I'm just going back to Baltimore real quick. The
Oh, sure.
interesting thing about them, and the reason why I think you're kind of on the right track, is looking at them as a team in this market to bet on, because you want that kind of uncertainty, is Baltimore tends to go with their board, right? They go with the best guy on their board, and it's usually kind of irrespective of position. Now, they do end up usually doing a good job of filling needs, but they're usually just, it's because their board is just usually better than most teams' boards. I think they draft really well, and they have done so for a while. So I do think Baltimore, just because of their track record and what they've been known to do, that they are an intriguing team in first drafted player markets. But where are we going next?
I'm just still curious about Miami. Armstead retires. We were talking offensive line there a little while ago. The odds are extremely different based off different books. Last week it was minus 120 one book, plus 170 another. Now it's still minus 110 one book, plus 110 another. So you're still seeing relatively different odds at different places, but kind of like Houston, who offensive line went from minus 175 to minus 230. I think there is an exaggeration. I still feel like Miami's in the market. Now, the issue might be that your top two dogs from the offensive line are gone, and you got to see, do they like Banks? Because that's probably the Banks zone. But I feel like offensive line at plus money with Miami is intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's probably going to get. It's probably already past the point. Like it's getting to that point where it's the chalk almost. And
Yeah.
I would again. What are they? Because like now, are we still going all in? Is it like a mini rebuild? Like, what are we doing if we're Miami? Because, with Armstead and remember, you had the whole situation with Tyreek Hill. Do they try to just move him and get as much as they can in return, and does that then put them in a market for a wide receiver? Miami's another one of these teams that I think
Maybe move back, right?
Yeah, and we just kind of look at Miami, we see the obvious holes, but again, not really thinking about, well, what if they make a blockbuster trade? And if they did, I think Tyreek Hill's probably the first candidate that comes to mind, just because of all the craziness that happened in the last the last game, week 18 game last season. So I think Miami would be quite interesting wide receiver, but that's how you got to start thinking about a lot of these teams in this range. Is like, okay, if they make a move or a move is made, like what happens? Because these are just, it's kind of just an order of team need here. It's like, O-line, defense. Yeah, we get it. I've seen tight end is like the number 4 or 5 and number 5 for Miami. And like, why? I feel like they're pretty set at tight end.
Yeah, it does make sense.
Yeah, it's I think so. I think and then running back, I get why it's long, but a wide receiver does stick out to me just because of the Tyreek Hill situation to close the year.
The only other one that I wanted to talk about was Buffalo. You mentioned Baltimore. You look at Buffalo's depth chart in terms of wide receiver, and there's just a lot of names there. I mean, obviously they bring up Coleman, they get Coleman. Then they add Joshua Palmer. They just signed Khalil Shakir. They still have Samuel there. They even have Chenault on the roster. Like, they just have a ton of different wide receivers. I wanted to think wide receiver was a decent option there. I mean, I see it as high as 16-1. I mean, I think it would take a slide from like McMillan or, I don't think Golden makes it to them, but I do think McMillan is an interesting option. Maybe he's is he too much like Keon Coleman? I feel like they're kind of similar wide receivers in a sense. But that was what I was looking at. Cornerback better. Yeah. Cornerback plus 330 was the other one I was looking at for Buffalo. But I do feel like Buffalo might be, and the reason I think Baltimore and Buffalo and I've mentioned KC as well, I think good teams are easier to predict. Like, it's just easier to predict where they're going to go when I feel like they make the right decision more often than not.
Yeah, it just really comes down to, do we think they'll trade or anything like that, or that because I think, you wonder, you mentioned cornerback, and you just wonder about their, how do they feel about their secondary? I think the thing about receiver with Buffalo is that they kind of had this mentality that they don't need a top dog. You know, we thought they were maybe bluffing, and it was just kind of a nasty split with Stephon Diggs, but we saw them really just spread the ball around, lean on a run game. They acquire Amari Cooper and don't really do anything with him. So it's hard. And then even Kincaid, who they took early, is a guy who probably a bit underutilized. It's tough for me to say that they will take a wide receiver again.
16-1. It's the flyer.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. I guess maybe if they're down on Coleman, which I don't think they are, but I mean, yeah, it's just really tough to get a read on how they feel about their passing game. But I would kind of maybe look at that the secondary. You mentioned cornerback and even safety. I think those are positions where they need to make sure that they're straight, because they know they're gonna have to go up against Kansas City every year. They know they're gonna have to probably not get a pass at Burrow missing the playoffs every year, and you got Chase and Higgins there. So that secondary, those are the two that stand out for me. Safety and corner. I think those are where Buffalo should go, and just the fact that they've been so spread around, I'm a little less bullish on wide receiver. But it could happen. They did last year.
corner to me though is probably, I think it's a little mispriced. I think plus 330 range. It should be closer to DL and edge, which is the odds-on favorite at the moment. So that would probably be my bet.
Yeah, because it's tough to say after Buffalo goes, Kincaid, Coleman back-to-back years, and they're spreading the ball around, another pass catcher essentially in the first. That would just, I don't know if that would be something that they. I feel like they feel like they got to go a different direction. I feel like it's probably going to be defense. But again, there always could be a trade. There always could be a guy that falls to them. And the one thing about receiver, which I'll say is it's not a bad bet for these teams in this range, because it just seems like receivers might be falling a little bit more than expected in the draft period. So the first wide receiver might not come off the board until later than we think. Same goes for the second. So that could lead a team like a Buffalo or a Baltimore, or somebody that maybe we're not thinking of in that market as much to draft a player just because he's the best player available.
Two things that I was going to say is, so Buffalo has 30, 56, and 62. So they have Minnesota's pick at 56, which if you have 56 and 62, you could probably find a wide receiver if that's something that you're looking for and not have to use that first round pick on it. The way I tend to try to attack this, which you can tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but I feel like the really good teams, the 32 to 27 range, tend to be very close to a championship. So they tend to take a chance on maybe a skill player, a worthy, a this, a that makes it into that zone that might get them over the hump. Now for Buffalo, maybe that's the cornerback position. So maybe that is they feel like it's the one position that would help them against Mahomes versus we don't need another skill position. But I just feel like that 27 to 32 range every year is something I tend to try to attack a little bit because it's more predictable.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs tend to do they're kind of the poster boys for those luxury picks. Yeah. Remember they did it with Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah,
I think it was in the COVID year. Buffalo is funny enough you say Worthy, because Buffalo literally faded.
Correct.
Worthy. But I get your point is taken. I think because these teams, a lot of these teams have track records. We even with the maybe a GM moving on, it's guys under them are promoted. So it's a lot organizationally. I think you're right. There are some predictive qualities. Baltimore kind of tends to go best player available, but it also seems to end up filling a need somehow. The Chiefs tend to go a little bit more for a luxury pick that could help the offense. Although I don't, this year they might need to go line, so we'll see. But yeah, I do agree. I think those teams, barring a trade, and that's the thing that always kind of you never know, because you also have these teams where 27 to 32, there's always this talk of how many first round grades do teams have on guys. And it's usually not 32, right? It's usually, there's drafts where you got 15 to 20 first round grades. So a lot of times you could see these trades back in this range, which could also kind of throw a wrench into things. But still some intriguing opportunities. And just because like as you alluded to, there's just not as many holes on these rosters.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, that is all I have in terms of these. Anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think we're good.
All right, this has been the Action Network Podcast, NFL Draft Edition. I am Evan Abrams. That is Chris Raybon. We are 2 weeks out from draft day. We will be back with 1, 2, 3 podcasts before that day. So we will see you next week, and enjoy the week, everybody.